Welcome to Procedures Manuals by Rising to Excellence Admin Training. This video examines the creation of a procedures manual for your office. Rising to Excellence offers affordable video presentations focused on the administrative professional career. Webinars are designed to be viewed during your commute, while waiting in line, or during your downtime. Thank you for joining us today, and let's get started. We will be discussing four major points today. What is a procedure manual? Why do I need one? How to create one? And why keep it updated? A procedures manual is the outline of how to accomplish your assigned tasks. Its design and format will depend on the type of job you have and the type of tasks you perform. So what is a procedures manual? It's a guide of how to get your job done. A procedures manual should be printed and stored in a notebook, not just as a file on your computer. Why, you may ask? If you're out of the office and someone needs to do a task that you usually do, they can pull out the book and go through the procedure to complete the task. I don't know about your office, but in mine, sharing other people's files is considered a security risk. They will not allow you to have access to someone else's email, their hard drive, or even shared files unless you've been specifically added with permissions through HR. When I was hired by the college in 2010, the person leaving the job had moved to another position on campus in the library. The building I was in is next to the library, but she did not feel compelled to help the new person figure out what and how to do in the job. She was upset about the hiring of a new IT director and the loss of the family atmosphere in the department. The new director's job was to clean up the department, although that was not widely known. He was supposed to weed out the dead wood and hire competent professionals to do the job properly. Since her cousin was the former temporary CTO of the IT department, she was upset at this change. Unfortunately, it was at my expense. She left me 2 pages of hand-scribbled notes on how to take meter readings on the copiers. But I was not allowed to retrieve her spreadsheets to make the charges to the other departments for that copier use. There were other spreadsheets as well for phone calls, long distance usage, cell phones, and equipment purchases. I was forced to create them by myself without any prior knowledge. This became my rally cry for anyone starting out in a career or for people looking for advice or best practices. Always create a procedures manual. It took me a while to learn all the ins and outs. I was actually yelled at by our accounts payable person for sending her a downloaded spreadsheet of the cell phone bill instead of waiting for the actual hard copy of the invoice to arrive. Since I'd been instructed to do this by that CTO, I was set up for failure. He also had me converting quotes from PDFs to Excel or Word documents so I could copy and paste part numbers and descriptions into our ordering system. I found out later it was because he was dyslexic. But in the process, in 2010, this took sometimes 30 to 60 minutes to complete the conversion, and my orders were becoming delayed. So I stopped listening only because he was steering me wrong. So I learned through trial by fire. I also created from scratch the procedures manual for that position. I've been fortunate that it hasn't been necessary for me to use it, but there may come a day when I need surgery, have a car accident, or fall and break a hip that someone will need to use it. In my last position, I had the same scenario and did the same thing. It turned out I did need that manual 3 separate times in 15 years. I had a baby and 2 different surgeries. The temps hired were to follow the manual in order to get things done, and by receiving phone calls during my recuperation, I learned a few lessons on how to prepare a manual and how not to. But first, what is it? It's a step-by-step bullet point list for each task that includes a narrative and screenshots. It must be detailed so anyone off the street can sit down and complete that task without asking questions. It's also helpful for audits and reviews from regulatory agencies. What it isn't is a place to keep passwords. You should not use people's names who are currently in positions, even if they are in an institution in your company. It's not generic and it's not private, and it should be created so it can be shared. So why do I need one? It may sound cliche, but you may be hit by a bus. You may need emergency surgery, have a car accident, or in my case, have an incident with a dog and a head injury. You may have horrible news that a parent or child is hospitalized. You may need to take family leave to take care of them. You may have a baby or decide to take time off to earn your degree. The scenarios are endless, but you get the point. Tomorrow is never a given. There is only today. So it's smart to plan ahead and never need to use it than to put someone in the position of not knowing what to do or how to do it. Don't think of it as a working document for yourself. Think of it as if you were leaving instructions for your replacement and you're retiring tomorrow. So still, why do I need a manual? It gives you and your boss peace of mind that if something happens, they can still get the work done and they don't have to do it themselves. It may even help while you're on vacation. No one wants to be interrupted while they're at the beach or on a ride at Disney, just to tell someone how to order toner for your copier. It should stop the emails, texts, etc. while you're away. It gives the temp something to work from and feel confident that they can be helpful during your absence. What a manual will not do is replace common sense. It does not share idiosyncrasies of working with your boss or colleagues. It does not replace your firsthand experience. So now, on top of everything else, anyone can now do your job. Just what we need. But seriously, during my first surgical leave, the person they hired to fill in was so dense. It took me hours to explain things to her. And this was after I was off. It's important to realize I had trained her for 2 weeks prior to leaving and had her doing the job for the most part the second week, and I was only there to help if needed. I know that was a very difficult job, and it was in the mid-90s, so computers were not at every desk in my office. I still had a memory Xerox typewriter. We still answered a lot of phone calls, and our emails were internal only. It should have been simpler, right? Unfortunately, it wasn't. That was the time I discovered that a fresh person coming into the office situation, not knowing the people, makes it worthless to use names in the manual. After this, I changed all the names to titles and realized that this now could stand the test of time because people do leave jobs and new people are hired all the time. It wouldn't make sense to change your manual every time someone new was hired. So how do I create one? You need to start at the beginning. Your manual will be different for each job or industry you are working in. When I worked for the financial advisor, it was task-based and running reports, greeting clients, how to engage the client when the boss was late, which was often, how to set up new files, they weren't straightforward single files, and regulatory rules like confidentiality and keeping all correspondence, even if it was an email that just said thank you. When I worked for the church, my manual was laid out day by day. It was a part-time position of only 6 hours a day, and it had a different set of tasks done each day. Mondays, I gathered information for the bulletin, along with answering the phones, going to the post office for mail, opening and distributing the mail, announcing arrivals for appointments, website management, overall building schedule, and key maintenance. Tuesdays, I prepared the bulletins and the announcement page that went into the bulletin on a separate sheet of paper. I created templates to allow quicker completion of those tasks. I hate doing redundant work. Wednesdays, I printed the bulletins after they were approved. Thursdays, I either took the bulletins to the volunteer who was housebound, or another volunteer took them to her to fold and stuff. Fridays, I made the large print bulletins and distributed all of the bulletins in the specific places in the sanctuary for the ushers to hand out. Each day was laid out with the instruction for each task, including where the post office box key was and what time of day the mail was ready to be picked up. The job at the college was again task-oriented. How to enter a voucher and a requisition, how to maintain the hard copy files, how to take the meter readings, how to do all the chargebacks for equipment purchases, cell phones, postage, and copy shop jobs. All of these tasks have changed several times in 10 years, so the manual was updated with every change. Timing of when the budgets were due, when payroll is done, what holidays we have off, what shared calendars we use, how we plan the holiday party. It was all there. You'll want to consider using the same format for each page, putting the path of the file in the footer to include the date of the last revision. Print it off so it can be easily accessed to anyone who needs it. Get granular. Of course, you know your procedures used to get tasks done, but writing down each step, including when and where to click boxes on the web page, should be included. Use bullet-style instructions. If you ever had trouble with written math questions, this is why you need to eliminate all extra wording. It won't seem rude, trust me. Use screenshots to help the newbie know what they're looking for and where to click. And yes, it will be tedious, but you don't have to do the whole manual all at one time. Schedule it out for a couple of months to give yourself enough time to do it well. If you're new to the job, when you learn a new task, write it down to make sure you understand it and the person teaching you verifies that you got it. Always assume the person using the procedure knows nothing about it. Test your procedure yourself, first by asking a colleague to try it second. If it fails, make necessary changes. More often than not, you've forgotten to include a step because you're so comfortable with it or it seems obvious. If they get through it without asking questions, then congratulations, you did a great job writing it. So why keep it updated? To avoid the same problems you had without one. If you came to your job without a manual, you'll understand why it's so important to keep it updated. Updating your manual should be a much easier task than creating one. When your software is updated, just make sure you change your manual. It probably did change how you do the task, and of course, the screenshots will be useless to someone new. I want to share a story about a young, naive office worker whose long-term office mate had surgery, unexpectedly. Like many of us, she didn't have a manual or even instructions on doing certain tasks. I will preface this to say it was in the early 1980s, and we had just upgraded from an enormous NCR machine that looked similar to those brown cash registers, but had lots more rows of numbers, to a smaller machine that used a cassette tape to record our sales and accounts payable. In school, I had taken a course given by an IBM employee about data processing. And while I passed the course, I really didn't understand what they were talking about. This was 5 years or more later, and I knew how to enter my sales invoices, include the correct tax codes, the product numbers, the account numbers, etc. But I needed to enter the accounts payable while she was gone. There was a little window in the front of the NCR machine with red numbers that changed as you entered an item. So you would enter the date and hit enter, and the number would change. You entered the account number and hit enter, and the number would change, and so on. She did show me how to enter her stuff, but I was so used to doing the sales that I neglected to follow the numbers. And you get in a rhythm and you sort of forget and go back to what you're used to. Unfortunately, her system had more fields than mine. And I ended up entering the date, which was March 31st, 1983, into the total field instead of in the date field. At that time, we sent our tape to the bank in another state, actually, and they would process the tape and send back our green and white striped computer reports. And the boss's wife, who was sort of the unofficial bookkeeper, couldn't figure out what had happened and why the financials were so off. It took them a couple of weeks to figure out what had happened and that I'd put the date in the wrong place. To this day, I still say if she had printed out the instructions of how to do this, I would have done a better job. That's not blaming her, that's just stating the obvious. But back to school, I finally understood what the field was accompanied by the number. It finally clicked into place. So if you've prepared your manual by these pros and con parameters, you and your replacement should be successful, and you can rest assured that things will be done and done correctly while you're gone. Without a procedures manual, you leave yourself open to vulnerabilities in the system if you are ever out of the office for any length of time. They give us the detailed guide to accomplish tasks effectively and efficiently and within the parameters of company policy. Imagine life without technical how-to videos on YouTube. Most of us would be lost. Thank you for joining us today to learn about procedures manuals. We hope you'll join us on this journey as we create a collaborative admin community with social media message boards, comments, FAQs, and panel discussions, along with the excellent content we will be creating. Watch the announcements for additional services and offerings so you can get started finding solutions and enhancing your skills. Bye for now.